I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. So I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining from Miskwachiwaskahikan. This is a place that's colonially known as Edmonton, Alberta, and it's on Treaty 6 territory. It's the traditional lands of many diverse groups, including the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux. And since we're meeting virtually, it's a great opportunity to connect to the lands which we each call home. So I'd like to also acknowledge all of the traditional territories that you guys are all joining from on your computers today. Having a respect for the land that gives you food and life is an important step in the reconciliation process with Indigenous groups around the world. And we're really lucky today to be able to look a little deeper into that connection with the land and explore how we can help give back to the earth in a meaningful way. So I invite everybody watching today during our event to keep that in the front of their minds while you really think about the connection to the land and the soil where you are all at. So just a quick heads up on what our agenda looks like. We will have a little bit of time at the end of the event. If you want to type them in the chat, that works. If you would like to ask them out loud, you can go ahead and raise your hand emoji, and you can even ask them on microphone, okay? All right, oh, and one more reminder, if your school has this activity sheet, you are welcome to work on this activity sheet while we chat, and you'll be able to share them on camera at the end of the event. If nobody printed the activity sheet, that's totally fine. You're welcome to do it after the event too, but we will give a little bit of time to anybody that does have it if you would like to share on camera at the end. I would like to welcome all of our schools that are participating today. Now, I know a lot of you are joining us from YouTube, so I'd like to say welcome to everyone joining us from YouTube, but also welcome and thank you to those of us that are joining live on Zoom. Hello and welcome to our schools joining us live on Zoom. So you can see we've got quite a list of schools that are joining from across Canada and around the world. So hopefully you're able to see your school up there and I can give you a little bit of recognition. All right, I would like to now welcome our speaker. So Lauren has over 10 years of experience teaching and facilitating educational programs for young people about science and the environment. She's passionate about showing youth that they can make a positive change in their communities and for the environment. She also loves to share her knowledge of all things primate related, given her background in animal behavior and evolutionary anthropology. So welcome, Lauren. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Rebecca. Super happy to be with you all here today too. So yeah, I'm just gonna share my screen and get started. So today I'm gonna be talking about sustainable food and how we can eat in a more sustainable way, make some more sustainable food choices for the betterment of our planet. And really, I think what's really important to understand, I really like this quote, is up to 60% of our personal eco footprint, so kind of how much carbon and what we put out on the world is embodied in the food that we buy. So what we eat and what we put on our plates and in our bodies has a direct impact on what we are doing to the environment. So choosing to eat in a more sustainable way can be a really easy and efficient way for us to reduce our impact on the environment. So tell me a little bit about Jane Goodall, what she did. Does anyone know?
Now I'm looking at how young our group is there. I wonder if they even know about Jane Goodall.
So if not, no worries.
So we had one in the chat. One says she lived with chimps.
Yes. So Jane, back in the 60s, so a long time ago, she went to work with chimpanzees in Tanzania. So she went out to understand chimpanzee behavior, to better understand our behavior, because we are all part of the great ape family evolutionarily. And Dr. Louis Leakey, who is an evolutionary anthropologist, wanted us to understand ourselves by better understanding our living ape relatives. So Jane went out to Tanzania, out into the wild, to the forest, to follow this group of chimps. She had never done this before. She was basically by herself, and she discovered so many amazing things about wild chimpanzees, that they show things like love and compassion, but also behaviors like warfare. And she really changed the way that we understand chimpanzees and understand our environment and our impact on it. So nowadays, she's a little bit older. She just turned 89 earlier this week, which is amazing. And nowadays, she tours around the world speaking and engaging and bringing hope to people all around the world that they can make a positive impact on their environment. So for any of you in Canada, Jane is going to be speaking in Montreal and Halifax this coming spring in May. So there's more information on our website, janegoodall.ca, if you're interested to see her speak. So what do we do as an organization? So we have a few different things that we do, just to give you guys a bit of a background, and then we'll get into the sustainable food section. So we do community-led conservation. So we help support our community partners in Africa to live more sustainably. So helping with sustainable agriculture or with maternal health. So we can help those communities thrive and they don't have to go into the local environment to take from the forest and to be more sustainable and support the animals. We also support chimpanzee sanctuaries. So chimps who have been orphaned due to the exotic animal trade or the bushmeat trade come to our sanctuaries to live in the best way that they can in a captive kind of environment. We also help to continue the research at Gombe, where Jane started her research to help continue to understand chimpanzee behavior and science. And then we empower the next generation of youth. So that's what I focus on with our Roots and Shoots program. So we support youth across Canada to take action on local sustainability issues that they care about so they can make a positive change in their local community. And if you're interested in learning more about that, I'll have some information to share at the end if you want to get involved to take action on an issue you see in your local community. And Jane Goodall Institutes are all over the world. I actually was speaking today with colleagues in the DRC, in Africa, in Tanzania, and in Austria, in Europe, which is amazing. It's really great to be part of this kind of global network of organizations, of Jane Goodall Institutes, and of Roots and Shoots clubs. So our approach when we are looking at working in a sustainable way, we want to look at what we call the three crises. So biodiversity loss, which relates to animals, climate change, which relates to the environment, and environmental inequity, which relates to people. So we always want to think about this interconnectedness between people, animals, and the environment, because a lot of the times you can't solve the environmental or the animal problem until you solve the people problem. And I think we know that climate change is affecting biodiversity. It's affecting certain populations of people more than others that are underserved. So everything really is interconnected. And we also value and want to center Indigenous perspectives in our work so that we can understand from knowledge keepers and elders of Indigenous communities across Canada, help inform our work and move forward in a positive way. And I love this quote from Jane: every individual matters, every individual has a role to play, and every individual makes a difference. Because I think that's so true. She really believes that everyone can make a difference and can make the world a better place. Okay, so now we're going to talk about sustainable food. But before we talk about it, we have to figure out what is sustainable food. So sustainable food is food that protects the diversity of both plants and animals, takes into account the welfare of farmed and wild species, avoids damaging or wasting natural resources, and minimizes negative effects contributing to climate change. So within this circle, we can see all of the different aspects of sustainable food and farming, everything from water, food waste, how we use the land. Are we making sure that we're supporting biodiversity? Here in Ontario, if anyone else lives in Ontario, some of you might have heard of the issues around the development of the green belt. The green belt around Toronto and the Greater Toronto area is basically a belt of green space that is used for farming, is used for biodiversity, and is very important to protect the green space in our province. But when development happens, we take away from that green space. We're taking away land used for agriculture, for food, for biodiversity. So that's something that, we should be advocating, that we need to save these spaces, because that green belt and that green space is so vital to making sure that we have sustainable food and sustainable environments for the future. And when we're talking about sustainable food, I think it's also important to talk about it being fair and accessible. We want to make sure that everyone has access to sustainable food. It's not something that's just for those that have lots of money or lots of resources. We want to make sure that everyone has access to this food and that it's equitable across groups. So why are our food choices so important? What we eat has a direct impact on the environment. So in this photo, something's happened to this forest. Does anyone know what that's called? That this forest has been what? Anyone have an idea? No worries. But basically, this is called clear cutting. Um, so a forest has been clear cut to allow what we call a monocrop or monoculture of crops to be planted. Deforest or for crop or for grazing of animals like cattle and sheep. So you can see how much forest has been taken down. All those trees, they sequester carbon, they provide us with oxygen, they do so many tools and things for us, but cutting them all down just to plant crops that will be used for, say, things like palm oil plantations oftentimes do this in places like Indonesia. And a lot of this deforestation is one of the leading causes of this large decline we're seeing in wildlife in the last 40 years. So animal agriculture also has a great impact on the environment. It contributes a significant amount, about 18% of global greenhouse gases, and use 70% of our agricultural land. So that's land to grow the food to feed the animals, and also the land for the animals themselves. So obviously, as populations grow, we need to more food to feed those populations. But as Rebecca was saying, a lot of the times why people don't have enough food is because food isn't distributed equally. There's enough food on this planet to feed everyone, but it's not distributed in a way that everyone has access to it. But as our populations grow, we need more food to feed an ever increasing population of people. And our food choices also are impacting climate change, and climate change is going to impact our food as well. And from the latest IPCC report, which is a large kind of multi governmental country organization who's reporting on the impacts of climate change, we really only have till 2030, which is only 7 years away, which is a lot closer than it seemed a few years ago, to keep our carbon emissions to lower carbon emissions and keep the planet from warming above 1.5 degrees Celsius, because anything higher than that is going to cause a lot of damaging effects. And unfortunately, due to continued use of fossil fuels and political will not being what it should be to kind of make enough changes, we're unfortunately moving towards that over 1.5 degrees Celsius. But when we move towards eating more sustainably, we as individuals can lower our carbon footprint. And while us lowering our carbon footprint, unfortunately, isn't going to change the fact that there are lots of fossil fuel intensive industries that are still happening in our country and around the world, we can help support and make those small changes and hopefully encourage those changes amongst our friends and family. And climate change is also a threat to our own food systems. It might diminish key crop nutrients, so food isn't nutritious, as nutritionally dense. It can slow growth of food production or change how we grow food. I know here in Ontario, as we've experienced droughts or too much rain or too little rain, especially the spring has kind of gone really late, so it's been really cold, and then all of a sudden it's really hot. We don't get kind of a typical spring that we used to. This can impact some of our main crops. I know apples have been affected here, and then also pests like insects and funguses and pathogens and diseases can spread more easily as things warm up here in Canada. Those pests from the south in the US can move up here more freely. There's been a lot of talk about ticks, which don't necessarily impact food, but impact humans, impact our animals. And as it's not as cold in the winter, ticks can survive and thrive and move farther and farther north and become more of an issue for us here in Canada. So I'm going to talk about a few ways that we can make more sustainable food choices in our own lives. So one of these things is wasting less food. So food waste is one of the largest but mostly hidden issues when it comes to sustainable food. So 58% of food produced in Canada is wasted. That seems crazy. We produce so much food. We're very lucky. We have a large agriculture sector in this country, but so much of that food is wasted. The food industry is responsible for most of this. You can see there's all these like apples and, I think melons kind of wasting away. And consumers are responsible for about 14%. So a lot of this waste comes from either there's certain sorry, I can't think of the word, but grocers, when they sell food, they want it to be a certain way. They want it to look a certain way. They want it to be shaped a certain way to package them and to showcase them on the shelves. So a lot of that produce, it's not perfect. Plants aren't perfect. They're nature, they have imperfections. So a lot of the times, a lot of those fruits and vegetables aren't shaped or produced in a way that those that want to sell the food want them to look. So a lot of that food can get wasted in that sense. And then us as consumers, we see something in the grocery store, it looks good, we want it, but then maybe we forget about it in the back of our fridge and it goes rotten. And I know I've been guilty of that, but I'm going to talk about a few ways that we can kind of reduce our own food waste. A large amount of food is thrown out before it never reaches our stores, like I said, because it's not perfect enough. And Project Drawdown, which is a large organization that kind of ranks the different ways that we can reduce our carbon footprint. This is the third largest way, reducing our food waste, to reduce carbon footprints. So when it comes to reducing our food waste, what can we do to do that? Well, you can meal plan. So you could figure out with your family what you want to eat through the week. So basically every week I have a calendar. I figure out what I want to eat Monday through Friday, what we're going to have for dinner. Maybe we're going to go out one night. Maybe we're going to order in, figure out what we're going to eat. And then I make a list based on those recipes. And then I just buy those things. So just buying what you actually need for what you're going to eat can really help reduce buying impulsively, or just saying, oh, that looks good, maybe I'll cook with that, but not having a plan for that food. And also eating your leftovers, having what you had for dinner for lunch the next day, or if you're out and about and have leftovers from a meal for dinner, take that home to have it for lunch the next day. So another way we can be more sustainable in our food choices is eating more local and seasonal food. Obviously, living in Canada, we have a shorter growing season, really only through late spring till early fall. But by eating food made close to us, we can reduce the amount of energy needed to transport the food for us. So obviously, this isn't something that we can do all year round, unfortunately, or it can be difficult to do all year round for us in more northern areas. But in our seasonal times, when there are farmers markets, when there's local produce in the grocery stores, try to make it a priority to eat that local food. And if you have a local farmers market, this can be at local farmers, which helps support our local agriculture. So we aren't as reliant on imported food, because as we saw with COVID, supply chains can get messed up. It can be hard to transport things. We want to make sure that we have a robust food system in our own country so that we have food to support and feed us throughout the year. Another way that we can make more sustainable food choices is choosing to eat organic food. This organic food is used without the use of pesticides, produced by farmers that emphasize the use of renewable resources, soil and water conservation, to sustain kind of an environmentally sustainable agriculture system. And these methods can be used all over the world. But organic food can be more expensive. So it's not something that may be available to everyone, and that's totally okay. There's usually a list called the Dirty Dozen, which are the plants that have most pesticides, are the most important, if you can, to buy organic. This list comes out and is updated every year, so check that out. I think it's called the Dirty Dozen. And then the Clean 15 are the fruits and vegetables that not necessarily important to buy organic if you can't afford it. Another way we can be more sustainable in our food choices is to eat less meat and dairy. Meat and dairy provide just 18% of our calories, but 37% of our protein, but produce 60% of greenhouse gases and emissions. So, and rearing animals for food is not super efficient because we have to feed those animals to then eat them versus just eating the plants, the grains, the fruits, the vegetables, the beans ourselves. We're feeding that food to the animals to then eat them. And eating less meat and dairy is one of the top ways that you can reduce your carbon footprint because it's so intensive to raise animals for food. And you don't have to go fully vegan and vegetarian. I know people like meat, it's part of their culture, it's part of their family, but even just reducing it can be really helpful. My family, we are vegetarian, but that doesn't mean that sometimes if I'm in a place where lobster is really fresh or local, or fishes, that I won't have that sometimes. But I think if you're making a choice and making those sustainable choices on a more regular basis, you can really make a positive impact. And some of the things you can do meatless Mondays, choose a meal of the week or a meal each day that you don't have milk, dairy, or meat. And it can make it a lot more approachable than just kind of going cold turkey, which can be for sure hard. So, what are sustainable food issues that you see in your community? So, every community is different. Seeing from where all of you are across Canada, there's so many different communities in different places. We live in such a large, diverse country of different environments and communities. So, it's really important to look directly in your community to what food issues you're facing. So, here I live in Toronto, so big city, really diverse population. And there are things that we call food deserts. So, areas where people live in the city, usually in more marginalized, underserved communities, that don't have a lot of access to healthy food. They don't have access to a large grocery store. Maybe it's smaller convenience stores, or they have to take a bus or a taxi. They don't have access within walking distance. Maybe they don't have their own car to drive, and it can reduce the accessibility to those healthy fresh foods. So, getting out into your community can be a great way to understand what issues there are when it comes to sustainable food. So, when we talk about this, it's called community mapping. And this is actually the basis of our Roots and Shoots program, is to go out into your local community and see what those issues are. This is something that we started when we were working with our African communities and on our projects in Eastern and Western Africa, to ask the locals, what are the issues? Show us your community. Where are those issues? How can we help? So, this could be an example of a map showing the food issues in your community. This was just taken from another community that we work with, another school, but maybe there's no fresh produce available, or you see food waste in a dumpster from a grocery store. Maybe there's local grown food options, or a few vegetarian options, or maybe organic food is too expensive. So these are just some things you might see in your community. Every community is going to be different, and that's why it's really great and important to get out to see what those issues are. And once you see the issues, you can take action. So, when we talk about our Roots and Shoots program, there's kind of 4 types of action that we encourage. So, it could be educating. So, educating your school or community about, say, lack of access to fresh and local food. It could be restoring. So, it could be planting a school garden, lettuces, herbs, corn, or not corn, sorry, zucchini or tomatoes are really easy to grow in a small garden. You can motivate. So, encouraging no waste lunches, or using a composting program at your school to reduce the food that's going into the garbage, because once it goes into the garbage, it's just going to rot and expel greenhouse gases like methane. But if we compost that food, it turns back into soil, and then we can use it to grow more plants. Or it could be advocating. So, maybe you see in your community there are not a lot of sustainable, affordable food options. So, writing a letter to your mayor or to your provincial representative to say, hey, this is an issue. How can you do this? How can you help? Or your local city councilor, or whoever that person may be, to say, hey, this is an issue. What are you going to do about it? And see if you can get action taken that way. So, thank you. I hope you guys learned a little bit about sustainable food. If you're interested in our Roots and Shoots program, you can sign up at rootsandshoots.ca. We have a section for teachers to sign up and to do the program with their class. And if you want to get in touch with me to learn anything more about the program or about sustainable food, you can reach out to me at lauren@janegoodall.ca. And thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the presentation, Lauren. So much great information. It really makes me think, because we do have a couple schools that participate in our projects that did start a couple small projects similar to what you're talking about. So to the students that are watching, if your school does not have a composting program, super easy to do, super fun to do in the classroom. You can grow things with it. And just like a small thing that you can do in your school to kind of start to make a bigger difference. So just like a little thing that I think would be a fun takeaway is if our schools participating could make sure that they're participating in a composting program. So yeah, now's our chance, everyone. If you have questions for our guest presenter, you can go ahead and put them into the chat, and we will answer them as we go through. As well, if there are any schools or classes or homes that would like to share any of their activity sheets they've been working on today, you can either raise your hand or let me know in the chat, and we'll call on you and go ahead and put your screen up for everybody to see. So we have a couple questions. So the first one is coming over from YouTube. So, and I can feel this, especially living in Alberta. We are a very beef-centered culture. Everybody that I know eats beef. But this one is kind of, I guess, a bit of a personal question since you say that you eat vegetarian. What are some of your favorite vegetarian recipes?
Oh, I love pasta. It's probably my favorite meal. So anything pasta related. We've been doing lately, I have a small toddler, 2-year-old daughter. So also trying to find foods that she will eat is a challenge. But right now we've been really liking naan pizzas. So it's super easy. You just take some naan from like the grocery store, put a little tomato sauce. You could do some cheese, vegan or regular cheese, and some veggies. And it's like super easy. Pop it in the oven. Stir fry is always good. Tofu, some vegetables, a little sauce. Those are probably some of my favorite like go-to foods. Nachos also with some beans in the oven. Those are probably my favorite right now.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, it's like a good little some good ideas if we're trying to get our family to eat a bit more vegetarian, you can try out some of those tastier meals. Okay, the next question is asking about eating seasonally. Is this considered to be sustainable, or do you have anything, maybe even advice about trying to eat seasonally where you live, especially in a northern climate?
Yeah, so eating seasonally is for sure considered sustainable. I think when we're eating seasonally, we're eating what's growing at the moment. We're not eating, say, an avocado that's grown in Mexico, whereas, yes, we can't really grow avocados here, but, or say, having berries in the middle of winter versus just waiting to have here in Ontario, we have amazing local fresh strawberries in the spring and summer. Kind of waiting for that time to eat strawberries. For sure, it's super sustainable to do it that way.
Awesome. And I feel like my little piece of advice for that question as well. And I know that packaging is not ideal, but it's not always terrible to eat canned fruits and vegetables throughout the winter. Lots of them have lots of vitamins in them. They don't taste terrible, so you do not have to be paying to get those fresh vegetables refrigerated and shipped to you to eat them, even when it's not sunny and warm outside.
Also, frozen's really good too. I like frozen peas, and they're Canada grown, and they're just flash frozen. And then I can have fresh peas throughout the year.
So one of the activities that we had sent out to our schools was taking a look at one of their favorite meals that they eat and really looking at where each of those ingredients on the planet come from. Because I think a lot, especially in Canada, and I know a lot of our schools are international, but we do have a lot of Canadian schools as well. I think a lot of the students don't realize the impact of how far their food has to travel to get to their plate and how much carbon dioxide is produced that way. I guess the question that I'm kind of coming to with all of that is, do you have any advice or tips on trying to choose meals that would maybe have a smaller carbon footprint in that regard of like transferring food? I don't know if that's kind of already been covered, but I just know we really were looking at that. Like we get most of our food from South America. Like how do we help with that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's easier in the summer to do that than in the winter. But I think in the summer, like if you can get all your vegetables from the farmer's market and then even see if there's like a local mill or a local bread company or something that maybe mills their own flour. I know in Toronto, I just came across like a company that like mills all the flour and uses that flour to make their bread and things like that. I think farmers markets are a great place to go for like a hyper local meal because usually there's like if you do eat meat, those are probably the better places to get your meat because a lot of them are raising their animals in a more sustainable way. They're not factory farming, so that it's a lot lower impact on the environment. Local, with local eggs and cheese and things like that. So I think if you want like a really hyper local meal, go to a farmer's market during kind of those seasonal times, and I think you can probably do your best then.
Totally. I wonder how many of our students watching have been to a farmer's market or go to them regularly with their families. They're so fun, and there's
Mhm.
great produce there, but there's so much more too. It's a perfect family outing if you do it once a week throughout the summer. Totally, I 100% agree. And speaking of local meat, I did see in our chat that one of our schools said they're an agricultural school. I know that some of our schools are very rural, like they're right there where that beef is being produced.
Mhm.
So I know beef is not the best option, but better to get it from a local producer than from a factory farm for sure. Okay, my next question is, what can students do to help address people that are hungry locally? So what is a good class project or something they can work on to help with local hunger issues?
Yeah, I know that's a huge issue right now across Canada, with food prices soaring and stuff. I've definitely seen, long lines at the food banks in my area. So you could volunteer at a food bank. You could do a food drive at your school to have people donate to a local food bank and then take that food. I think that's definitely probably one of the best ways, because those food banks are the ones that are able to provide that food to those that are in need. And you can be a way to kind of help those food banks out. I know a lot of, after Halloween, because everyone gets so much candy, or you have leftover candy, and maybe you don't want to eat all that candy because it's not super healthy. A lot of food banks in our area were asking for leftover candy because it's a nice way they can put a little treat in the lunches for the people that come and have lunch that maybe don't have access to food. That could be an option too.
That is such a great idea. That reminds me so much. One of the schools that I used to work with would do something called Halloween for Hunger, which I'm sure other schools maybe have done something similar. But instead of trick or treating for candy, when you kind of get to be that age where you're a little bit too old to be trick or treating, but you still want to do it, you trick or treat for canned goods. And it's super fun. You still get to get out there and wear a costume, maybe with your friends, but you're collecting canned goods for the local food bank. So another great idea. And I see the Freesons here are saying that they participate in something called a community supported agriculture, where they get all of their grains from. Are you aware of any programs similar to that?
Yeah, so those are all over, I think. So it's basically you buy like a share into a farm. So ahead of time, you say, "Hey, I'll put in like a quarter share or an eighth of a share, whatever it is," and basically you're committing to be getting food from them through like the growing season. So it helps small farms know that they're going to have income coming in, and then you are receiving that local produce.
Oh, very cool. That's such a good way too. I know a lot of our students were saying that one of the focuses they would like to see more in the coming years is more support for farmers, because all of us are kind of seeing that farming is starting to become like not cool, and aging out, and they want to see that kind of like support so that young farmers can get into the field. So that's a really cool way to do it. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing, Friesens. While we wait for a couple more questions, I did just want to do a quick reminder for all of our schools. So if you guys have more questions, you have a 2, 3 more minutes to get them into our chat. But while we're waiting, just a reminder, if you guys like this event or you would like more similar events, we do have an event happening next week for World Book Day. So we're going to be talking about comic books specifically, but more broadly about banning books. Why are books banned? Why do people censor books? Why is it an issue to censor a book? So if you think your students might be interested in participating in this one, maybe learning a little bit about comics, we're meeting with a wonderful speaker who is also an author. So I think it should be a super fun time. So feel free to sign up for that if you haven't already. So I just wanted to put that little reminder out there before I forget. And I don't see any new questions from the group. So I have one question for you. I like to ask this near the end of our events. If you had one big takeaway or words of wisdom that you would like the students today to leave with, what would that be?
Oh my goodness. I would say that it can be a lot. There's a lot happening in the world these days. And it can feel like a lot of pressure because we say, young people, you are the change, you're making the difference. And it puts a lot of pressure on youth, I think. But I think thinking that you can make small changes in your local communities, in your school, with your family, with your friends, that can make positive changes. You don't need to take on the world's problems. Climate change is an epic problem that everyone needs to come together and solve. Mostly politicians and industry need to come together to solve that problem. That problem's not on youth to solve. But we can take actions in our local communities to make the world a better place, even if it's something small, even if it's something for just your class or just your school. You can do positive things without having to feel like you have to solve all the world's problems.
Yeah, that's wonderful advice, because I do think a lot of our students get that almost like climate grief or climate anxiety, where they feel like the problem is too big. But I always say to the students that participate in our decarbonized program is that you could talk the talk, but you also have to walk the walk. So it's great for us to say that there's all of these big solutions to climate issues and food issues, but we have to be doing changes in our own lives to show that we're committed to making those bigger changes. Recycle, please use a compost, please try to eat vegetarian. And I know a lot of our students participating are young in those decisions. Before we do our final, had any, and I know our school is just called 1A. I don't know what our actual school name is, but do we have any activity sheets we wanted to show before I let everybody go? I feel like that's a yes. Okay, all right, awesome. And if you guys have a microphone, you're welcome to unmute and tell us about them as well. I don't know if you have a working microphone or not. I'll go ahead and put you on the spotlight. Oh, I see a watermelon in there. That looks wonderful. Oh, they're very good colorers. Looks great. What else we got? I should have put on some viewing art music here. Looks great. Oh, I see St. Clement is also sharing some of theirs. Can go ahead and put you guys on here. Beautiful. That one is very bright. I see some bananas. That looks super healthy. Apples, yeah, lots of fruits and veggies. Ooh, a pizza on there. Maybe those guys would make some of that non-pizza you were talking about. Oh, wow. This one's got a lot. I really hope that you guys are going to make some of these things that you're putting on your posters today. I would love for you to bring them home and get your parents to try out some of those foods. A lot of food on that one. This person was feeling very inspired. I think maybe grapes in the top corner. Oh, yeah. These kids are very good. Lots of fruits and veggies. That's awesome. I know one of the activities we gave them was looking at the Canada's Food Guide about what they should be eating. So I think some of them must have definitely done that. Beautiful. That's a nice banana too. Oh, St. Clement, I see you guys have another one up there. Maybe an eggplant. Awesome. And they're so colorful. They always say if you eat a rainbow, you are going to be healthy, right? You want to be eating lots of different colors of fruits and veggies. Awesome. Nice. That looks great. Maybe a carrot from St. Clement over there. What is this one? That one looked like maybe something that would be eating the vegetables. Yeah, it looks awesome. Beautiful coloring. And I think we have time for a couple more, St. Clement. If you wanted to turn your camera on and show us your last couple, I don't know if you guys had any more. Watermelon, that looks great. Oh, nice carrot. That's awesome. See maybe some grains in that one. Beautiful. Okay, we've got time for just our last couple. Awesome. These look so good. I'm so happy. It looks like you guys definitely learned a lot about what foods you should be eating. So I hope that we go home and we eat some of these delicious and beautiful foods you guys drew for us today. Thank you very much for sharing and participating. All right, that's it. We are out of time. We only had a couple minutes left. I wanted to thank everyone for participating. Thank you to everyone who came on Zoom and did our activity and shared. I loved seeing your drawings. I think you guys learned a lot. That's really great. And especially thank you very much, Lauren. Thank you for sharing all of that amazing information. I hope that you inspired the students to take some actions in their schools and their communities. You gave me lots of great ideas, so I'm sure you gave them lots of great ideas too. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. Have a great day.